Hey, good morning, everyone. We're just going to start off top of the hour. So we'll kick off top of the hour. I'll see you guys then. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Spaces with me, Kalu Aja. We do a money space every Saturday, 7 p.m. West African time, where we talk about money, personal finance, investing, and of course, the economy. We want to make it personal. How does all this affect you and your personal budget? So this Saturday, I want to talk about the Nigerian Start Up Act. It's now an act which means it's been signed by Mr. President and it's now legal law. So I had a few comments about it, and I'm very, very happy that we've gotten some experts and actually the guys that crafted this bill, presented it, and got it all passed through here today to just talk to us about this and maybe get us to understand why we need this bill, what it's going to do for us, and of course, what are the advantages, opportunities out there on the bill. I've got Davidson here, Davidson Mark Oturu. I'm expecting Osareti and of course Aki Aina. They're not here yet. Call Aina, sorry, they're not here yet. So Davidson, hi, good morning. You want to just unmute, say hi, introduce yourself, and maybe we can kick it off while we wait for your friends.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on part of the world where you are at the moment. A pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to us having some really fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for doing this. So, if you don't mind, we can start. If ever they join, they just send me an invite to add them, and I'll, of course, do that real quick, get them into the space as well. So, let's just start with this. If you may, could you give us, before we talk about the act, give us the background? Why was this important? Why did we feel the need to have a startup act or bill? Why is it important? Just the back end of the whole story.
Sure. Um, a couple of things have been happening over the last few years in Nigeria, and um, kudos to the different founders and startups that have been sort of making waves in the Nigerian space. But one thing that has consistently been noticed, and I've been at several fora where some of these things come up. It almost looks like when startups are progressing, suddenly the government gets up and says, "Ah, man, something is happening here. Let's find a way to either tax it or kill it."
Mm.
Uh, we've seen a couple of things that have happened. Those in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space have had their businesses sort of hampered and stifled. We've seen the SEC or the CBN clamp down on fintechs who may be operating in some opaque spaces. Well, we were there when the few fintechs like RiseVest had their accounts frozen by the Central Bank of Nigeria on the pretext that they were involved in foreign share dealings.
Mm.
There was Chaka FinTech as well that was that the SEC came down on because they were enabling Nigerians buy shares from foreign companies. We saw what happened with Gokada and a couple of other guys. And so the ecosystem players and leaders said, you know what, how about we take control of the narrative, right?
Mm.
And stop being on the receiving end. How about we see how we can bring a level of sanity, uniformity, and what you may call friendly laws or regulations that would enable the ecosystem rather than stifle it. And so those are some of the considerations that were put in place, and the Nigerian Startup Bill, project was more or less formulated. I've seen a couple of things and people have said online about the Startup Act, and I can understand where their pessimism and their positioning comes from. But here's where this is different from any other law that we will probably have in Nigeria at the moment. It didn't come out from folks just pulling out something from the air and saying this is what it will be. No, there was a lot of painstaking research that went into it. A lot of people may not be aware, but in Africa at the moment, you probably have close to 13 countries now that have startup bill slash act. Tunisia was one of the first that had their startup act. Kenya is following close on their heels. You have Rwanda, who has a lot going on there. Ghana also has a startup bill. A couple of them have bills and acts that have come into place. Senegal has a startup act. And
Mm.
so we looked at what was working in those systems and also looked at how Nigeria is. Everybody knows that Nigeria is a different animal. So you can't just copy and paste what's going on somewhere else. You need to inquire and dig deeply into what this is. And so that was what we did. We spent a couple of months researching, interviewing, understanding, and studying how those systems work, not just limited to Africa. We looked at the Jumpstart Your Business Act of the United States. We looked at the UK law. They have a startup law there as well. We looked at Italy, we looked at Malta, we even looked at China, we looked at the Netherlands. Trust me, it was a very extensive thing. Now, it, it, at the back and at the heel of all this was a case of how about this be a collaborative effort? So rather than it just being the government who would typically probably bring out a law and then everybody starts to scratch their head. This was a case where the ecosystem was actively involved in this process. So we call it a big tent
Yeah.
approach. And Oswald is a disciple and apostle of that. So he will speak greatly on how that whole approach was adopted. But it was a case of the ecosystem players on one side, the regulators, and then the government on the other side. And we had those deliberations where sometimes we almost came to, insults and all of that. But the ecosystem pushed and said, look, this is what would work for us. And I think at the end of the day, we have something that is a step in the right direction and can only get better.
Excellent intro. Thanks for that. That just sort of gives us the back end, how you guys were thinking about this. Excellent. We've got Saretin here. He's the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Digital Transformation. Hi, you want to just hop in, say hi? I don't know if you heard what Davidson said. He gave us a very, very good intro. Why you guys thought about this bill and the thinking behind the bill. It's important for us to know this, and then we're first going to start. So, Saretin, you want to just say hi and introduce yourself as well?
Hello, how you guys doing? Thanks for setting this up. One of the big things that we are pushing is awareness, and we welcome every and all opportunities to talk about the bill. Davidson has done an excellent job, as expected, of setting the tone, and we can just move forward. Introduce myself. Well, my name is Oswald Osai Tinkobadia. I'm currently working for the President of Nigeria, and I'm the lead for the Nigerian Startup Bill. I've been an entrepreneur in Nigeria for close to 20 years and supported startups for just about that long. So, this bill also comes from a painful point for myself as well. So
Mm.
let's move forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, right? And guys, if you're just joining in, right, I've just shared the startup bill. There's a link to the startup bill. They have a wonderful website. These guys just explaining what the bill is, FAQs, partners, support, and all that. Very, very well done. So I just shared that for you guys if you want to just hop in there and also get some more information there. So let me just get right to it, right? So first of all, guys, great job on this bill. I look at the timeline. This must be one of the fastest bills in Nigeria. First draft was produced in June 2021. We have the bill passed July 2022. Lots of partners are in this bill, from the government to the private sector. Lots of folks look like they participated. My first question is to get to it. Why is there a need to bring the government? I know Davidson sort of gave an overview. Why is there a need to bring the government into regulating startups? I see there is a board, we call it a board. The president is going to be there on that board. There are a lot of government folks in there. Why is there need to have the government in there, apart from the part of the side of letting them know what we're doing? Why should the government be in a startup?
So I would just say this, right? That's a very interesting question. I would say as an entrepreneur myself over the years, if you asked me maybe just 2 years or 3 years ago who the ecosystem was, I would
Mm,
say, it's us now. It's me, Davidson, Fuma, Kalu, and every other startup person we know. But then, from my experience with the NSB, I've come to realize one grand mistake we've all been making, right? The ecosystem is actually made up of practitioners. That is, most of us who we call ourselves the ecosystem, we are just the practitioners, we're the value creators. And the other side of the ecosystem, that's carrying the same amount of weight as the value creators, is the policymakers,
Mm.
right? So to develop a healthy ecosystem, you have to have a collaboration and engagement between these two parts.
Mm.
Otherwise, you have an unhealthy ecosystem,
Mm.
right? So where you see that a value creator is out there trying to disrupt, I'm going to disrupt how we do this and this. Fantastic, I'm all for it, right? I'm excited about any idea that's brought to me. I'm always excited about disrupt. Oh, wow, you're going to change how the world works. I love it. Those are my favorite kind of shows and movies, and in real stories, and listen to people in Nigeria talk about their passions and visions, what they're going to disrupt. But what we fail to understand is that the policymaker, without being educated,
Mm.
sitting where they sit, may only see displacement,
Mm.
right? So you may disrupt how something works. The policymaker who's in charge of that area sees that something has displaced how things should be, because all they're doing is managing what is now, right? Because we always say policy goes behind innovation, right? Although, if we don't have regulations and policies, how do we really determine if that's what's really happening, right? So we don't live in ungoverned spaces. We live in spaces that are governed. And this is globally, even the environments that we admire are all governed spaces, right? So it's critical that partnership. So instead of saying, the question is kind of vetted from a perspective of, why don't you just let this thing run free and remove government? But without government, you are now in an ungoverned space, right? So what the bill is saying is, let's not have ungoverned spaces. Let's have collaborative and engaging spaces where I intend to disrupt, and I'm going to disrupt this, but I also have a plan on how I'm going to engage the policymaker to ensure that they don't see displacement, that they understand the new, I guess, lack of better words, evolution that I've created. Because it's not just disruption, you created a change, and in change is evolution. Something is going to evolve,
Mm.
and with evolving is process. With process, people need to understand it, and that's why collaboration and engagement is required. And that's why both parts of the ecosystem is required to make a healthy ecosystem. Otherwise, these particular issues that I'm not going to mention, but I think Davis has mentioned some of them. If you go and review each one of them, you will see that is a case of disruption, and you will see that the policymaker was more than likely trying to solve displacement.
Gotcha. I mean, so the council like that we talked about that has a president. We're talking about they're going to formulate policy. They're going to give direction. They're going to approve the programs. They're going to monitor and evaluate. It seems to me like we're bringing the teacher into the boys' room to say, look at our homework as we do the homework. So that if we fail, you can. Is that what I'm? Is the sense that you want to put the teacher right there with you? I mean, the question
Okay.
is, this is where I'm going to, and I want to get past that hill. Like, did we had to bring the government in to ensure that we don't get surprises down the road? Is that the DNA of it?
Okay, let me hop in here before Oswald comes in. As a matter of fact, I actually wanted to your first question, Oswald answered it, but there was a particular word that you used that I caught. And of course, sometimes as lawyers, our ears catch some things that, sorry, Oswald, that I have to say this, but laymen, don't catch. So the intention of the bill, or rather, well, now the act, is not to regulate startups, because you see, I've seen that thrown around in a few places, and I sort of understand where that may be coming from. The purpose is not to regulate startups. You already have enough laws that provide that sort of framework. For instance, there's the Companies and Other Matters Act, CAMA for sure, that already provides for how companies are set up and they are run. So the intention of the Nigerian Startup Bill is not to regulate startup. Now, if you are a startup, you can pretty much operate and do whatever you want. There is a labeling process that is provided for under the act, and this is not a registration process, but I'll explain, because sometimes they can just sound like synonyms or maybe just semantics. Now, if you look at the Startup Act of Tunisia, they have that labeling process in place. What it does is, say there are 5 or 10 startups that meet the criteria. We've set out a couple of criteria there that will be considered by NIDA. We didn't create a new body, but used existing laws and frameworks. So you come to that portal. NIDA then considers whether you are qualified for the labeling. What the labeling does is that it entitles you to certain incentives that the bill has sorry, well, when I say bill, you know it's the act, that the
Yeah.
act has provided for. So those incentives are there. Now, if you are not labeled per se, you still enjoy the wide variety of incentives that other companies in Nigeria would enjoy. But the labeling process is almost like an incubation stage. It's almost like you want to have these set of startups that meet those high growth criteria, and then you work with them so that they scale and now come forward as success stories. So
Mm.
in Tunisia, where the labeling started, where the labeling process started, the act came into law in 2000 and 2019. In that year, they recorded almost $23 million in revenue for the startups that were labeled.
Gotcha.
Those startups brought in profit of that amount. Now, when they started in that 2019, only 16 startups were labeled. But I'm telling you that as of July 2022 alone, over 40 startups were labeled. But it doesn't mean that if you are not labeled, you are not a
This
startup. By
this is
all means,
this is the question
enjoy your startup
I
process.
get to. This is where I was trying to build this hill to. Like, so if I am a flutter wave 15 years ago, right, and I'm not labeled, so I'm still a startup. Just that if I'm labeled by this bill as a startup, I qualify for incentives. Is that it?
So yes, and well, to an extent, no. So you see, there are wider varieties of incentives that the act provides for that are not just limited to the labeled startups. But yes, the bill is very clear that to enjoy the labeling process, for instance, you would not have been in existence for more than 10 years. So to anybody who exceeds that, you're not qualified at all. You may choose to call yourself a startup, but of course, there has to be a sieving and an entry process. So you would come under that labeling process and be considered. It's sort of geared towards the early stage guys, the folks that you know that are struggling and are bootstrapping, that really need this funding, as opposed to your flutter wave who are already sailing high. But nevertheless, we do know that valuation and some of these figures that are put out there doesn't lead to growth per se. So there will still be that scrutiny of your stage and process to determine whether you qualify for that. Now, back to the council that you mentioned. You see, it's not like your typical government body where you have a president there and a couple of slackers just sitting down there. The ecosystem is actually represented in that council. I believe there are about four members of the ecosystem that would also be on that council. It's not a come and chop type council, So you would have founders there, you have VCs there, you have angels, you have people that impact on the ecosystem directly who would sit on that council, legislated by law, and then can, because they know where the shoe pinches them, you can be rest assured that the sort of policies that will come out there will not be draconic, but will be directed towards the growth of the ecosystem. So it's almost like a process whereby the ecosystem has been written into the law,
Yeah.
and so their own positioning has to be considered.
Gotcha.
I don't know whether Toswald will want to come in there, but I hope that has answered,
Yes, it
that.
like
Yeah.
maybe also can give us like in Nigeria 2022, who is a startup?
In Nigeria 2022, who's a
Yeah.
startup?
Yes.
No, I mean, the question is sort of loaded. I think the companies that are startups are companies that, so the other problem with that question is that, that when we first did this bill or started the bill process, the question was always, why is it just tech enabled, right? Even to the very end, there were certain entities within government that thought that it should be broader, right? Beyond tech enabled. And we remain focused on tech enabled as who this bill was targeted at. A fast growing young company is a startup, but I think that phrasing startup globally, if you go anywhere and say startup, people tend to think tech enabled.
Mm,
I think as Davidson just said, we did not dare to start a registration process for startups or determine who a startup is.
mm,
What we did was bring attention to a sector
got,
and created a labeling process to bring the companies that fit that labeling process, which will now allow them to benefit of what the bill has to offer. But
got,
the truth of the matter is that when you ultimately get the bill, like Davidson just said, you will see that there are a lot of seeds planted that go beyond the labeling process. It goes beyond. I mean, there's certain things that once it's set in place, like if we're talking about support for hubs and accelerators, once you supported the accelerator, the bill says nothing about who the accelerator then supports, right? There's support for free trade zone setting up. Once you set up a free trade zone, there's nothing in the bill, in the act, that actually says that free trade zone can only be for labor startups, right? So it's more so a catalytic document. And the truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, this is just words on paper. What really brings all this to life is the participation and continued engagement. So it's one of the things when you actually see the document and read it from a perspective of, and I'll keep repeating this throughout the conversation, it's really about collaboration and continued engagement. That's what makes all of this work, right? So once we have that in place, I tell people all the time, the KPI for me is that 2 years from now, Kalu and a team of people are reviewing the bill against how it was implemented and what benefits we receive, and saying, let's do NSA 2.0. And, Davis and I are sitting somewhere, looking at it and go, wow, that's fantastic. I hope they call us for advisory, right?
I hear you. And I like that word you used. I like that word you used also. It says catalytic. And I'm just reading this act. So it says, if the startup is labeled with at least 10 employees, 60% of whom have no work experience and graduated from school, they get tax breaks from income tax. That's again a 5% tax break. They also can apply the NIPC for a grant for tax reliefs and incentives under the PSI scheme. They can access export incentives. They can access government grants. They can access financial support through the credit guarantee scheme. Talk to us more about this, Oswald. So if I'm now a startup, I'm labeled. Talk to us really about what I get. What comes to me from this bill? Let's now go into the more benefits.
So the bill, and I'll say this again. So the bill, if you look at the bill, there's collaboration, there's engagement, there's incentives, then there's linkages, right? So incentives are what you start off with. Although one of them that you mentioned in the beginning is they did not make the bill because it's being it is the federal bill. Taxes to employees is more of a state level. So that now speaks to state adoption, which I believe at some point we'll discuss in this conversation. But then when you now, the rest of the stuff you now said is linkages, right? So when you start looking at what are the issues with getting services from government, one of the things the bill does is it brings all the agencies that you believe that you need interaction with on a day-to-day basis, CAC patents, it brings them closer to the startup via portal, right? Then when you start thinking about activities that happen within government to help startups, but it just seems like it's happening in opaque. They say it's a credit scheme, or there's a loan at CBN, there's a loan in Bank of Industry. How do you access it? Oh my God, does it really exist, or is it for friends and family only? The bill gives the secretariat, the ability to pull these things together and bring them to one place. So if you're a label startup and you have access to the portal, when you go into the portal, the portal is not built yet, but if you want to imagine with me, you go into the portal, you see a section that says, let's just call it agencies. You go there, you want to do something with CAC, you do it with CAC. But you're not looking for credit schemes or loans or something physical. You go there and you see, there's a credit scheme or there's a loan with Bank of Industry that actually fits what you need, for your agricultural XYZ. So that's the whole idea. And the way the bill works, the people who are doing this pulling together are continually empowered to ensure that they are negotiating and pulling these people into this place and bringing them right. When I say this place, I mean the portal, right, as a place of operations, right, to make sure that there's a continued engagement and a continued service delivery to this particular sector, being the tech-enabled startups. There's a number of linkages into universities. There's direct savings. There's linkage into giving incentives to list on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. There's a seed fund, which will be funded by the government and other parties. If you look at situations where companies want to raise $2-3 million, they're becoming Delaware companies for that. We can fund $2-3 million through a seed fund in Nigeria, so the company remains Nigeria location-wise, right? So there are a lot of different things. And every time I look at the bill, I keep, the word collaborate, the word engage, there's another word in here that is used that also means collaborate. It's really about ensuring that the agencies collaborate with this, this secretariat to deliver on the council's agenda. Now, agenda setting, if you think about it, as Davison said, Davison mentioned that, there's about four seats for the private sector, but it's sort of six. The other two, the Nigerian Computer Society, and the other one's for CPN.
About five.
But ultimately,
about five
Sorry?
guys. So five, two from the community service, and then yeah, but five.
No, you're reading a you're reading, I think the bill you have is a post effect copy. Yeah.
Okay.
So I picked up on that earlier when you mentioned the tax benefits. So there's a post effect copy that was actually on our website, and I think was circulated. But once we went into the National Assembly, anybody who was paying attention would see that we pulled it down from our website because
Mm,
obviously changes will happen at the National Assembly. So
God.
during the National Assembly, public hearing and a number of other engagements that happened in the National Assembly, several changes were proposed by honorables and distinguished gentlemen of the gentlemen and women of the I think they're called distinguished gentlemen regardless of gender. Anyway, you get the point. That were negotiated and accepted within the bill, and some of them were really in that tax area. There was a lot of restructuring in the tax area. There was some lobby effort to increase the amount of private participation in
Yeah.
the council, which we all agreed on, and that happened. So right now it's on an 8-to-6 ratio. So 8 government direct and 6 private. And then one thing you have to understand about having a council, and the Honorable Minister of Digital Economy, Communication and Digital Economy said this himself. He says the president has the ability to direct. So if you think about all the red and blue tape that's been just avoided for this one sector, right? If anything else, right? If you imagine you're in a conversation, the ecosystem or the practitioner side of the ecosystem have managed to get 6 really people who can deliver value on a council conversation with ministers and Mr. President,
Mm,
right? The opinion of the day is the opinion that really benefits the ecosystem. It's just one directive and it's done,
mm,
right? So that's one of the key things about and the layers are not that deep, right? So if you look at it, you have a council. Under the council, you have a secretariat. To the side of the secretariat, you have a consultative forum. Now, the
mhm.
consultative forum is made up of the labeled startups, funders, and everybody who belongs in the ecosystem joins this forum, and they engage the secretariat to ensure policy development will also be happening on the portal. By the way, so policy development is happening at that level where you are developing the policy, you must engage the consultative forum. You're in SEC, you're developing the policy, you must engage in the consultative forum. But guess what? SEC, by the way, you read it, right? So SEC cannot even release that new regulation or policy without it going to the council,
Yeah. Seen that. Seen
right?
that. Seen that.
So
And I want to, because I want folks to listen just to understand, like, this is really, really, like I said, at the beginning I commended you guys, about this. This is well thought out, right? So there's a lot of linkages here with the regulators, and I just want to make sure you're very, very clear about that. This is not just an IT startup bill, right? This is a startup for just be clear on that, please, just for case boxing. This is not an IT, or is it just an IT startup bill? Just to be clear.
So I'll let Davidson step in here because I think there's some language legalese type thing. But the truth of the matter is there is any business that is tech enabled, right?
Tech.
So health tech, agri tech. I mean, the truth of the matter is the direction we're going. I was actually the why this sector. I didn't want to answer the question by saying, hey, it came from, sort of my office and the partnership with people I know and my experience and the
Mm,
people who pulled together all tech people. And this is the sector we know, but not necessarily, right? The truth of the matter is this is the fastest growing sector in the world. And Nigeria just, I don't know if it's by luck or instead of by God's blessing, has all the ingredients to dominate the world in this particular sector.
true.
We have young people, we have very intelligent young people, we have very intelligent, hungry young people. We have a huge need, as in there's so many things that can be fixed. The world is moving towards technology, and we have the need, we have the young people, we have the hungry people. So it's just really about creating that enabling environment. I know it's getting to a point where even I am tired of saying the word enabling, right? But that's what this bill does. It's really about creating that enabling environment so they can do what they're going to do, right? Right. So it's really about moving obstacles out of the way. It's really about solving the little problems here and there that they encounter, right? And attempt to solve those problems and let them create that value, that we believe this will help, the ecosystem grow, right?
Yes.
But globally, everything is going tech, right?
Gotcha. I love that. So let's talk more about this startup investment seed fund. I like it. And if you could talk more about that.
So the seed fund is going to be managed by the Nigerian Sovereign Fund,
Yeah.
NSIA. It is a minimum of, this is something that was added. So in the copy you're looking at, you wouldn't see this.
Yeah.
A minimum of 10 billion annually is to put into the fund.
Wow.
It's a commercial fund. And the thing about, and the reason why the language, and you applaud legal minds like Davidson, a minimum of. So it's very clear that annually that we have to find that much money to put in that fund. It's a commercial fund, and it's going to be targeting early stage startups. In my mind, when I think about it, what are we solving, right? You're trying to raise $1 million. I know a company that I advise raised $1 million, but now they're a Delaware company, right? We can fund $1 million into a company, and that company probably needed 3-4 million, right? We should be able to fund 3-4 million into a company that we believe is going to add value, right? And it's also interestingly in that language. I think in the version you have, it actually says it, right? It's also for hubs, accelerators, because we understand the entire ecosystem. We understand the play the accelerators have. We understand what the comfort and the ability to start up that hubs provide. So it's really about supporting the supporters, right? So financially, and there's other languages within the bill. I mean, there's a whole section, in fact, that speaks just to hubs, tech villages, free trade zones, and accelerators and incubators, right? Just giving them different seed planting to help those areas grow. So the seed funding is a commercial fund that is going to be managed by the NSIA, and the way I envision it down the road, and some of this is very much implementation, is that ultimately it will probably become a fund of funds, right? If you're talking about 10 billion, other people have already approached us. They're interested in putting money into it. So very very easily we could be talking about 10 billion is over what, $14 million. So it's not huge, but we can see very easily third parties joining and easily making that fund 20 to 40 million dollars in the next one or so year, right? As long as we see the how it's operating, how the value potential they can add. If you even look at the idea of labeling startups into a process that actually helps startups, you can also see how that could also be a DD for people who are looking to invest. And this is not something I'm even making up. This is something that investors have said to me. They've come to the country, they've come right to Abuja, come looking for myself and Davidson and the other members of the team. We sat and we have conversations, and they say, yeah, they see how this is already putting it for them. If you're saying, I'm looking for 10 agri-techs, come and look at the label list now. These are companies the government of Nigeria itself says, and even us, we've already put $1 million into, right? And if you look at some of the problems, as in, if you're a startup, I started a company in Nigeria over 15 years ago. Shoot, if year one somebody came and offered me $1 million for 45% of my company, I probably would have dashed them 55 as Jara and said
Yeah.
thank you, right? But that is also a problem. Are we releasing equity too early, right? But let's not go into the weeds. I think the seed funding. Yeah, go ahead.
I hear you. I hear you, Oswald. And let me just say this, right? So I'm reading the part that says regulatory support, and I will just say this to anyone listening: like, if you want to write a bill, you want to get this page called, not on their own, on their own site, the website for the Startup Act. You want to get this copy called the regulatory support, and you just want to copy it. Because what they've done really is to go to all the, should we say, the gatekeepers in Nigerian regulatory environment, the NCC, the CAC, NOTAP, even the Nigerian Stock Exchange, CBN. And they've essentially said, what do we need from the CBN? And they put it in there. What do we need from the SEC? They put it in there, So I like the fact that they identified the gatekeepers and have brought them in and said, this is what we want to do to make startups, should we say, tick fast. And I'll give an example. There are special portals that they're proposing for CAC, also for, what's the name here, for SEC, to have their own special portals, or should we say startup portals. Might be easier, but you go there and you maybe get your SEC registration faster, like a one-stop shop. So very commendable that you guys have done this. I like the way you guys all went to this and got this all ticked off. So very, very good on that. Yeah. So guys, we're speaking with the guys that did the Nigerian Start Up Act. It's now an act. We've got Kubadia, we've got Davidson here. If you'd want to speak, I would like to add you now. We normally do a talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll allow folks to dial in or send DMSs and then request to speak to the guys. These are the guys that wrote the bill, guys. They know where the bodies are buried. So if you do have any questions or clarifications, please request. I will simply add you, and then you can go ahead and speak. let me come back to Davidson. Davidson's the lawyer. So Davidson, in terms of how you guys are going to interact more with CAC and equity, right? If I'm a brand new guy, young startup, right? Is there anything like that to protect me or to guide me against how I incorporate my startup, right? Is there any, what's the word I'm looking for? Protection for me that I don't know what I'm doing and I go in there and someone offers me, like what I said, I want to buy 90% of your company for 100,000 naira and I sell. Is there any way or any regard rules that protect this expropriation of capital, right? In this act.
Well, all right, thank you, Kali. Um, in the first place, right, we're looking at what are the problems that we've identified, and then what are the solutions, directly that affect the ecosystem as a whole. What you've described, though, looks like something that I would say a startup can have an advisor, a
Mhm.
legal advisor, the financial advisor. It's information that they can get, so it's not something that the bill would seek to protect you from, somebody who seeks to prey on you because of, that sort of situation. Well, so that's, and I'm trying to put this in a way that is appreciated. So that's not a problem that is that big. That's a very solvable problem. It's something that just by having, you know, an advisor, it basically solves that problem for you. If you're thinking of how to incorporate at CAC or how to, give shares to investors. I mean, those
Yeah.
are things that
The question,
can just the conversation with the right advisor and it's solved. What the act sought to do was to look at those larger problems, that the ecosystem faces. But interestingly enough, even for the labeling process, we took a few things into consideration. Now, there maybe sole proprietors or partnerships, right, that may not be limited liability companies. There's a pre-labeling process that brings them into the program whereby support can then be given to them so that they can grow and scale and then now get the full labeling within a 6-month period,
yeah.
and then they then get support to register the right sort of entity with CAC because for anybody who is in the startup space, that having a business name or a sole proprietorship or a partnership, they don't have share capital, so an investor cannot invest in those sort of vehicles. It will just be the individuals are investing in. So that's why even the
Let
law itself.
Davidson, maybe
Sorry.
I've been a bit too diplomatic. Look at what I'm really asking, right? What is this bill for Nigerians? Like, if I came from, say, a different country and I came to Nigeria, could I also participate in this incentive? So there's a pioneer status here. That's really what I'm trying to ask
Okay.
in a diplomatic manner to say, hey, is this only for Nigerians? Is it going to promote Nigerian enterprises? Or could I come from Cote d'Ivoire, maybe an American, and I can use this to get advantage to get this incentive? That's really my question, if you don't mind.
Okay, fine. No, yeah, that's fine. And that's a good question because Oswald and I and a few other guys fought over those sort of conversations. So it's a primarily Nigeria first bill. And Oswald may, may tackle me on a few points. But at the same time, we didn't want it to, because of so for instance, there's the AFCFTA, right, that seeks to, have one uniform market. We can't be talking about being part of that sort of wide market and then closing our investment space to external investors. But what we did was to make it in such a way that Nigerians would be the direct beneficiary. So for instance, if you want to get labeled, the process is all set up there. Number one, you must be registered in Nigeria, either as a limited liability company, primarily. Yes, you can, like I had mentioned, be business name, but you have to eventually become a limited liability company registered in Nigeria under Kama. Then there is a part that we sort of seek to accommodate startups that may have foreign participation, and that's
Mm.
understanding that you may have foreigners come into the business, but it doesn't mean that they really have the big box for you, really, and it doesn't mean that you've scaled yet. So what we have there is that at least 1/3 of the shareholding of that company must be held by one or more Nigerians who will be founders or co-founders. So that's like an investigative process whereby you have to ensure that Nigerians are more or less the ultimate beneficiary of this bill, so that you don't have a situation where foreign-owned companies 100% come in, take these incentives, and then repatriate the funds out. Nigerians have to benefit. We're seeing a lot of capital flight. We're seeing a lot of human flight, for want of a better word, and we're looking at a way whereby these guys can be encouraged to stay. Some of the innovative things we're even looking at were things like startup visas and other things. But we
Yes.
also have to consider, that we have laws, there are immigration laws, there are policies, there are things in place, and as much as possible, let's not create situations or systems that cannot be implemented at
Mhm.
all. So we had to still respect ourselves at the end of the day, and do what is possible within the confines of the law. But that's it, really. Primarily, Nigerians are the focus, but then we didn't close out, foreign investors who may already be invested in Nigerian startups.
Love that. I mean, the visa idea you spoke about, it tickled me, right? I don't know why you guys didn't really pursue to say, okay, like a digital nomad kind of thing. That would have been quite, yeah. So how folks to come in, all that.
Yeah, but
So
there's an Immigrations Act, right? That spells out, and then you have a whole, agency and parastatal of government that is dedicated to those sort of things. You then have the Ministry of Interior. So
Mm,
unless those sort of laws and policies in that space, change and lead to a level of accommodation, we could just be whistling in the wind. So
gotcha.
like Oswald said, there can be a Startup Act 2.0 whereby by the time it has already started, those sort of conversations can be had and can even be brought into this system. But for now, we just couldn't go that far,
Gotcha.
unfortunately.
Gotcha. And I'm just reading a comment here on Twitter, also supporting you guys. This is from Omi. The Nigerian financial system does not support startups. Most of the banks have an internal policy of not lending to startups because of the inherent risk. I'm quoting the Twitter guy here. The act will fill that gap and help incentivize. The 10 billion seed by the government is great. So he's essentially agreeing with Oswald that listen, we have a 10, is it 10 billion naira seed? Is that seed funded
Yes.
now? Okay, so a 10 billion naira seed fund there. If you get labeled, if you tick those boxes, you can potentially access that fund if you're a startup listening. Where can they get more information? Because I don't want to give this. I already shared this one, but what's going to be the best place to get that? Are you guys going to put it up on this drive that I'm looking at, or do you guys have where you want it to go to? What I have is startupbill.ng. Is the new bill going to be in here as well? Are you guys going to update that with it?
Yeah.
yes.
So oh, well, yes. So the secretariat is working around that. We have a version that was, the National Assembly version, but we don't have the signed
Oh,
version yet. Doctor is still trying to get that. And I guess the secretariat, the Nigeria Startup Bill Secretariat that manages information will probably, look for how to start disseminating it. Because I've had a few people sort of approach me based off, this other version, and I understand that there can be a bit of conflict around it. But yes, that's what it is.
is it too early to talk about the one, two, threes of accessing this 10 billion, like the broad one, two, threes? Is it too early to speak about how I can go from where I am, I'm a startup, to how I can access? What are the three big things? Is it too early for that?
Oh well,
I,
so okay, Oswald, please go on this.
no, I think you were about to say yes. It's too early. I mean, because you have to look at the process in which it's gonna work. We have to implement first, right? I think generally we can say for step one, you have to be a labeled startup. Two, you have to have a business that can take investment, right? Um, and pretty go from there. Basically, what do we take for anybody to evaluate a business idea and say yes, this is investment worthy? Is
Mhm.
is what we have to think. It's not a giveaway. You have to be investment worthy. But we have several businesses and
Again,
ideas that are this investment worthy in our country, and they're getting some of these very early stage funding after the friends and family round, after the angel round. They're getting it from overseas. that gap can be filled in by the seed funding. So I've been asked this question several times. I mean, people will just jump right in and say, "Hey, 10 billion, how do we access it?" But I would say, dear Nigerians, we need to implement the bill first, right? And after implementing the bill, then all these things will start going into play.
Great, great. Abraham, hi, good day. Thanks for joining in. You want to unmute and ask your question, sir? Go ahead. Abraham going once. Abraham go.
Thank you, Khalid. Great job that you're doing there.
Thank you, sir.
Just when you touched on the visa stuff, and I just want to query the guys a little bit, why shying away from the immigration startup visa? That interests me because I mean I've moved a lot of people from all over the world into the UK via investors visa. That's my specialty. Where via the tier one visas, entrepreneur investors and stuff, you are able to bring people into the UK. And I've had problem in understanding what the Nigerian immigration system is for startup. So you can imagine a lot of Americans, a lot of Black Americans or Caribbeans from all around the world who already admire Nigeria. This kind of opportunity can bring them back home to invest in Nigeria, and we can industrialize the country. I've been looking at ways that we can actually help to change the immigration policy in the country. Is there a way we can work to bring this to effect?
Great question.
Oswald, do you want to take this or do you want me to go?
I mean, I think ultimately, I think there are a number of other. If we had Kazim here, he would say this is not an over ambitious bill. Davidson, I think you like when you hear that a lot, right? So I would say, I would say that there's a number of other things that weren't touched by the bill, and this one is one of those things that definitely can obviously bubble up to the council and just become a directive, right? Because there's a number of other rules which are a lot of laws that Davidson can speak to that already speak to how this works. So if the actual act itself doesn't cover it, then it becomes the consultative forum that discusses it, maybe led by you, and it becomes something that now goes to the council and says, this is the reason why. This is the reason why we need this. We'll be able to grow this by X percentage, da da da. And guess what's going to happen at the council, right? There's going to be a directive made that says, Secretariat, please write immigration to change this policy, da 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 da, XYZ, done. So you have to look at the act from, and I will say it again. I think this is what I'm being paid to say: collaboration and continued engagement, right? So you have to look at the act as a framework to ensure that this particular issue that you just stated, right, can easily bubble up and can be led to a fruitful ending by a directive from the council. And the directive from the council is, I mean, once again, I don't think we had a chance to explain who's on the council. Is chaired by Mr. President and deputized actually by the Vice President. There's not too many councils for any industry that exists in that kind of structure. Most of the times you see just Mr. President or a vice president or a minister, but this is very particular that this is the area that's going to grow our economy. I think the last number that we saw was 18%. Most of us in the tech ecosystem believe that's even low, right? It's probably around 40% impact, right? And we have all the seeds, like we say in Nigeria, we have the yam, the knife and the water to make this particular pounded yam. So that's why the bill was set. So it's very important when people read this bill, look at it from that perspective. This is a framework to help create a even, and I was speaking to somebody today from Lagos Business School, and I spoke to her about the bill. And I even started talking about evaluation and monitoring. It's actually built in to ensure that the bill self-propels and continues to create that opportunity for us to continue to collaborate and engage, right? But the key ingredient that makes this possible, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to say this, the key ingredient is us, right? It's just words on paper right now. It's people. It's us engaging and ensuring that the bill does what the bill says today. And if the bill is saying something today or doesn't cover an area that you are not excited about today, it's critical that you ensure the bill works as is today, and then critical that you are part of the NSB 2.0 project that may happen next year or 2 years ago. Even me, personally, I've already opened a file on my machine called amendments, right? So as involved as I am with the bill, I already know one area one thing I want to change.
Interesting. Good. Yeah. Like, super.
So thank you very much. I will say I will engage with Mr. Kalu. And I mean, going through the presidency or the vice president is not as effective as having the draft first, having the research and the effort. I've tried that route in the past, and I realize is you may know them and you realize that things fly better when you've done all the job and they see where it benefits them. So I'll get in touch with Mr. Kalu after I've carefully read this bill. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, let's get Praise Olu Tuashe. Good day, sir. I hope I said that correctly. How are you? Please unmute and go ahead and ask a question.
Hi, sir.
How you
Good
doing?
evening.
Good
I don't know if you
evening.
can hear me.
I can hear you very well.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to. It's not really a question. I happen to also be on the journey with Oswald and Davidson. I think I'll just share how I came into the bill. So that we really understand like what Oswald is trying to emphasize, right? Um, I I personally feel that if we understand the framework that has been created through the council, right? Um, I heard Abraham's response after Oswald finished speaking. The council has now become that entity such that any any challenge within the startup ecosystem can be escalated in real time and be resolved in real time.
Mm.
If I'm to really encapsulate that, it's literally you're not sitting down somewhere saying, "Oh, this policy was just passed, and now my business has gone down the drain." No, there's actually now a mechanism for dialogue and resolution
Interesting.
through the council, and the way the council has been designed is such that the key stakeholders in terms of decision making, right, the different MDAs, and the reason why you have someone like Mr. President and the vice president chairing and co-chairing is so that bureaucracy is reduced to the barest minimum. If there's a need to address an issue that has, whether it's policy or is something about the business environment, the powers, the highest office in the country can execute in that regard. So so it kind of has a life of its own even beyond the act, in that things that are not written in black and white right now can always be done through the council.
You can always amend, right?
Yes. I mean, amend is one thing, but also to understand that there's actually a framework. So I'll give an example, right? Let's just imagine that one of the MDAs is about to push a policy and it adversely affects startups, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a portal of engagement. These things can be escalated, right, such that the council is aware of it and the right directives can be given to either resolve or reverse that.
Yeah, I mean,
that doesn't need an amendment. And then, for example, he's talking about the visas, right? And what Oswald is saying is he's not asking you, Abraham, to go to the vice president or the president. He's saying if there's a clear case that is made for how that is going to be beneficial to the ecosystem, the council has within its powers the ability to get immigration to do what is necessary. So even though it is not necessarily in the bill itself and the act itself, there is an entity that has been created, a framework that has been created by the act that allows these issues to be escalated, resolved, new ideas to be brought up, and the right measures taken.
Great. I mean, there was a startup. There was going to be a telecom tax. I don't know if that's part of you guys, though. That telecom tax came up, and the the ICT minister, sort of like stepped down, or sort of they said the president has took it down probably. That might not be you guys, but I'm hearing what Oyalua is saying in terms of if a resolution or a bill or a policy comes up that's going to be not going to really be beneficial to the quote unquote startup industry, because you guys have this council, you are able to discuss amongst yourself, maybe give a second opinion, and government can take a second look at that. I think the whole idea is to grow the startup industry. That's what I'm hearing, and I like it. I do like the whole idea of bringing the government together. I mean, I asked those questions very early on to just understand and make sure that we're on the same page. I'm a small government guy, right? And in Nigeria, the government is always known to tax. So the government is always known to tax. Just want to be very clear. In terms of taxation and startups, maybe I don't know if Davidson also can take this. What is there going to be any new taxes created with this act, or is there going to be? I see a lot of tax grants, so credit tax schemes, tax reliefs, and all that. But is there going to be any new tax to fund this act going forward?
Absolutely no new taxes.
So that's again,
So
absolutely no new taxes.
no new taxes. So let me just say two things. I mean, I know that we're pressed for time and a couple of things, but it's good that we leave here with, like clear understanding around a few things. And I'll touch on the tax part, but I'll also still touch on that startup visa because it's important that we have clarity around that. So yes, there are no new taxes introduced in the bill.
Yeah.
We scoped how a number of these laws and funds are seeded, and we stayed away from that completely. For instance, you have the ITF fund,
Mm.
that is, companies have to contribute to that. There's NSITF, there's NIDA, they're like maybe like close to 20 funds that people are just deducting from and taxing people.
You're right.
And we said no. So which is why the Sovereign Investment Authority is actually operating as the fund manager for this, and they will seed it without taxing anybody. The government will put its money there. They will do funding rounds where they will raise money to seed that fund, and startups don't have to pay anything. So it is important that that's captured in the headlines. No taxes are paid. No, there will be no deductions and no levies and all of that for startups under the Startup Act. Now, concerning the startup visa, I touched on it earlier on that there are departments and agencies that are set up by law. When those agencies are set up by law, they have the powers that come along with them. The Nigerian Startup Act cannot create startup visas because the Immigrations Act has already said the Nigerian Immigration Authority shall be responsible for certain activities. You also have the Ministry of Interior as well that issues business permits and you need approvals. So that's a different conversation. The Startup Act cannot now create a special class of visa that will conflict with the powers to create visas, which is already a statutory power that belongs somewhere else. But what Praise also said, and Oswald referenced, is something that can work in our favor through the council, because we have to consider all of these things. What can work and what cannot work? What
Yes.
can work by virtue of creation of law and what can work by virtue of policies? You have the president sitting on the council. You also have ecosystem players, six, like we said, sitting there. Now, if we know that sort of visas is something that we want as a solution, then it is brought forward by the council. The president then directs, the immigration. Okay, revise your visa classifications to accommodate this, and then that is created. But if we write it into the law, in fact, it may not even pass National Assembly, and people will be scratching their head and be wondering what sort of lawyers drafted something that cannot even be implemented in the first place. So we can't do things just to play to the gallery. We have to be practical, and we have to look at the language of the law and determine what works and what will just be a fly-by-night approach.
Gotcha. Excellent. Let me get Ramsey in here.
Let me add to that real quick. Sorry.
Oh, go for that.
I think it's just an opportunity for me to say these words again: collaboration and engagement, right? And I would say from this angle this time, when we put this bill out there and start to engage MDAs, even to the very last minute, there was always the fear that we are trying to recreate agencies, duplicate efforts, or just basically take over what other agencies do. And this bill absolutely avoids all of that. What it intends to do is collaborate with other agencies to ensure they deliver services, improve services to this sector.
Thank you so much for getting that clarification. Yeah, let me get Ramsey. I've got Ramsey. I've got okay, he must have dropped out. But Ramsey, go ahead, sir.
All right. So, for me, startup, I feel that I strongly believe that startup would be doing well in Nigeria without government coming out. Once you have, I always notice, once you have government in Nigeria coming out to try to regulate something, and they involve MDS, MDS are known to really be a barrier to businesses unless you pay a bribe. In I know I can give examples of people that are close to me who have tried to do businesses. And when you involve MBS, all the people they're looking at, okay, if they hear that a company has just raised 10 billion, let's say, let's call it a dollar. Okay, I know it should be naira. Look, let me call it naira. So it's a company that just raised 500 billion naira, and this is the startup. All the people sitting in that MDS, before they approve anything for that company, they want that money. They want that money to be paid to them as bribe, or they frustrate that effort. I'm not lying. Anyone working in the financial industry in Nigeria will know this, especially if you are in a company that give out loans to government workers. You know, when the government pays that money, they deduct, and then people sit on that money until those companies pay them bribe before they release the money. So usually you don't want government be involved in private businesses. Let them stay out. Even if there is a way that we shouldn't even have government regulate anything, anyone in MDA, any government agency regulate, because they hear you. When they look at money coming to a particular person or a particular company, they don't know how they struggle to get this money and where this money will be going. They want a huge part of that money to come into their pocket before they even sign any document for that company. And this is some way that I think EFCC should be focusing, but they just refuse to focus on this
All right.
and turn and be going after Yahoo Boss. But this is just my contribution. This is what I see. And raising money to have a startup is not the duty of a bank to lend money. It's the duty of private citizens, private businesses to put a stake in it.
Gotcha.
And yeah, thank you very much. Let me stop here.
All right. I think Davidson, do you want to, or sorry, do you guys want go, but do you want to respond to that? And then from there, I think we'll just try to wind it down. I think you made a comment about stating the fact that the funds have to come from the private sector, not government. That's the one I did pick up that I wanted to give you a response on. But you can also respond to it.
I think that's an interesting question. I think what you've done is what he's done is basically state some of the issues that we're trying to solve.
Mm.
So it just makes me feel like we need to have another one of these to reiterate some of the things that the bill is intending to do, just so that we can be able to dispel this particular pain that he has. The pain that he has stated is not unknown to myself and everybody else on here. But what we're doing is we're going beyond stating it to trying to solve it, right? The examples he gave, I would ask the question: what is your, recourse, right, in that situation? And in the bill, there's a perfect channel of recourse. If you're that company that just raised those amounts you named, it's very likely that you're in the consultative forum. It's very likely that you know the person who sits in the council. It's very likely that the person who sits in the council may even be an advisor in your company. It's very likely that in the council chambers, you're going to say to Mr. President that X, Y, and NDA tried to extort us. Now, anybody who listened to the Honorable Minister Issa Pantami's press briefing the other day, he even made examples about police and harassing young men with laptops in their bags as part of the issues that he believes this bill would solve. I thought it was overreach, but I saw his passion. I saw exactly what he was saying, and I see exactly how. Because if you think about it, we're all, I'm guessing most of you guys are analytical people. If you think about the issue, if you can bubble up, I could just imagine now the ecosystem or the practitioner ecosystem coming up with presentations on how exact issues that are happening, and that being presented at a council, unfiltered, right? Because it's coming right from the person you sent to go sit on council for you. And it's saying, look at this, police harassing people is happening at this frequency. It's not being going through somebody and one advisor and one other person. No. It's happening. We have brought government closer to you. So the idea that government should stay out of business is ridiculous. It does not exist anywhere. Is how will government stay in business? Do you want them to be adversarial or do you want them to be a partner? How do we make them a partner? By developing a process that we can hold them accountable.
I hear you. Okay.
And I will say this, and I've said this before, there are no more excuses. We have a bill that is now positioned to help us do exactly that. Everybody should be thinking of how they can support the bill, even if it's the last ditch effort. If it's after this one, you can japa, right? If it's the last effort, let's go behind the bill, because this feeling, emotion you just expressed, it's a real one. And the funny thing about Nigeria, people always think because when you enter government, that means all of a sudden I've changed my clothes. I've run businesses in Nigeria longer than some people were born on this chat. So I know the pain, right? That's what's being solved.
Quick question: are you in this council?
Hold on one second. Let me speak, please.
Ramsey, allow him to.
Every single line, almost every single line in this bill, I would say contributions to the line may have come from government or other people, but every single provision in this bill was put forth by a private sector person. The only thing government did to this bill was say, that may be too far. Instead of 10, make it 2, and that slight adjustment. Every single line was put forth by a private sector person to address. It got to the point it got hilarious. You start talking to people in these meetings we used to do, and you will see where somebody's pain point is. You just see it. They'll be like, there's one guy, every time we had a conversation, we could be talking about milk. He would start talking about free trade zones. We talk about water. He would talk about free trade zones. Davidson, you know what I'm talking about, right? So, every single line was proposed by somebody to address a pain point. One of private sector people. So, Ramsey, you can go ahead now.
I would two things, but the first I would like to know: are you a member of this council?
Am I a member of the council?
Yeah, he's
I understand.
He's the one that midwifed this bill. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to know, and you did mention that they're bringing government closer to the people. You said the president is sitting is in the board, and the vice president is sitting. My point to you, I'm just respectfully asking, if we want to bring government to the people, why do we involve the president in this council when I sit in my village or in my state to run a business? I mean, how is the president close to me?
I hear you, bro.
Okay.
No,
Carlo, hold on, Carlo. Ramsey, I really do appreciate your questions because these are real Nigerian questions, right? And I appreciate you for them. So let me tell you how that happens, right? I think we've missed the opportunity to even speak about state adoption. Which state are you in, Ramsey?
So I am from Akwa Ibom State.
Excellent. So Ramsey, one of the motivations of this bill, and particularly myself, is that I love the fact that you said village. It actually motivated me. One of my personal vision is that the next startup that impacts the world starts in the Nigerian village. Now, when you make such a very strong vision statement, you now start thinking, what are all the different things that you need to put in place to ensure that happens? Is it computer education in primary school? Is it fiber to the hot? I'm not being sarcastic, but it was funny to me, so I said it. Is it all the infrastructure you need to get it done? Is it wireless? What are all the things you need to put in place? Is it policy that you have to put in place? Now, the example I've been giving people of recent is this. I ask this question. I say, what is the difference between San Antonio, which is in Texas, America, Silicon Valley, which is in California, Silicon Alley, which is in New York, and Miami? Those 4 places all have fantastic infrastructure. They all have great schools. What they compete on is laws and policy. That's the only differentiating factor. So, if you're in Miami and you're trying to start a business, but you find out that your business, the laws in Silicon Valley are better for your business, guess what you do? You pack your bags and you go. So, phase 2 of the Nigerian Start Up Act is state adoption. We want your state, Akwa Ibom, to adopt the Nigerian Startup Bill. Several states have already started. I mean, the reason why it's getting slow is because of elections. So we're going to wait, partner, and see who wins and so on and so on. But ultimately, a number of states, Kaduna is already in draft. Edo State is talking about it. Lagos has announced it. Ekiti is drafting. A number of states have started this process. So it's to create that fabric of innovation across the country. When you now have all 36 states having a version of this bill that is tied to the federal government bill. Carlo, by the way, this is the reason why that employee tax thing got removed, because that's a state function. It's the state that can give employee tax deductions,
Gotcha.
not the federal government. So that was the thinking. It was there before as a conversation point and stayed there too long, but at the end of the day, it got removed and is now meant to be in a state version. Now, Ramsey, I don't know if you made a statement just now, which was, Mr. President being a council, how does that affect you? Let's try to solve problems, Ramsey. I understand what you're saying. Trust me. But you cannot say that statement and really think that that is the fact. We are saying that we have brought the president of the country to come and look at your issue. And you are saying, how does that affect you? Right? So let's be about solving problems. Because how does that affect you, Ramsey? Ramsey is now the chair of the Akwa Ibom startup community. He knows the guy on the, in fact, there's a local consultative forum in Akwa Ibom, and Ramsey is the organ of it, the chairman, right? He knows the guy who's on the consultative forum in Lagos. Those two have the conversation. Ramsey complains very angrily about some issue. They now go to the person who sits on the council that you guys voted, or you Ramsey that you voted for. He's there for 2 years. Davidson, correct me if I'm wrong. He's there for 2 years. You guys voted him, and you give him this piece of paper. Say, this issue is my main problem. It's not just me. Look at this graph. That 30 million or 10 million or so involved are affected by this thing. How do we solve it? And he's brought into a room where Mr. President is. Not via a minister, not via advisor, via the person you elected, who is somebody you will see next week at the beer parlor. And he takes it, and Mr. President makes a directive saying, I see that issue. After it's been argued, I see that issue. Please fix it. That's what we're trying to. We're bringing a focus to this ecosystem, right? And we brought the ceiling lower so that you now have a better reach to it. And then there's going to be substructures that even give you a better reach when you start saying Akwa Ibom adopts Nigerian Startup Bill, right? So that is the entire, is a fabric of innovation. You cannot live on government spaces. You think you do, but you don't. America, when people go to America to sign paperwork in Delaware, trust me, I know Delaware very well. You'll be shocked, right? Go and Google about me. You see how much I know Delaware. When people go there, they sign papers. Do you know how many laws and regulations and policies sit behind that one paper they're signing? Thousands. People don't want to invest in Nigerian companies, not because they think that Nigerian companies are not good, because the case law does not exist. They're not sure about the policies and the regulations. They're not sure about the regulatory and policy certainty. We are telling you that the Nigerian Startup Bill is going to bring policy and regulation certainty. So that when you're now investing, you don't have to fly to Delaware or hire a lawyer in America to do paperwork for you in Delaware.
Mm.
You can do it right here with your local lawyer in your town in Akwa Ibom. After you guys eat, I wish I remember a delicious dish from Akwa Ibom right now. After you eat that dish, you will now,
I think it's been a good back and forth, Ramsey and
yeah. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I think the key point I pick is this: laws. I like that example you made about Austin and the other cities, even Delaware. It's laws. In the end, no matter how good the infrastructure is, in Nigeria we don't have infrastructure like that. But no matter how good the infrastructure is, if the laws do not support investments, intellectual property protection, access to capital, and all that, it's difficult. So I like that example. I think you should use it more. Also use it more, right? So, guys, let me just have one last speaker just because he requested, and then we'll call it a day, if you don't mind. Thanks, Oswald. Thanks, Davidson, for hanging in there. Just real quick, I've got Biola. Biola, real quick, about a minute. Go for it, sir. Biola? I think it's dropped off. Biola, okay. Biola, if you can hear me, sorry, I give you a chance. I'm always going to round up the meeting because I promised guys for about a minute. All right, guys. So thank you so much if you've been listening and following. We've been talking the Startup Act that has been passed, signed by Mr. President. It's now law in Nigeria. Let me just say about myself. When I first saw this, I think I've seen this maybe months ago when it was being discussed. I'm not an IT guy per se, right? And I saw the bill and I saw startup and I saw labeling. My mind went to the fact that, oh man, these guys want to just create a rent seeking system where they label you startup and then you can apply for a loan. But I've done my study, we've invited these chaps over, they've explained and they've sort of given, let's say in a real down to the roots explanation of why this act is important, not just to me, but to the startup folks, to the states, to the federal, to investments flowing to Nigeria. I think they've done a great job. I would also say this, if you are part of a trade group, right? If you're part of a trade group and you guys are thinking about or you are complaining, I think this is a very, very good model to take. List your problems and turn those problems into opportunities. See if you can write something and get the government to partner and buy in. So you sort of you're tying them into success. You're saying, let's bring you into the how we work, and maybe you guys can become the success players in our sector. This is a very, very good job they've done in terms of how they've getting information out, how they've envisioned where they want to be, the incentives and all that. So I just commend them and all the folks that have partnered with them to get this out. This is not an easy feat, right? From first draft to bill pass. Lots of quote unquote stronger associations don't have a bill and haven't passed a bill. It's almost executive sponsored or NAS sponsored. This feels more like sponsored from the grassroots up. So I like it, right? They've addressed the issue of taxation, addressed the issue of why the president and the government is in a startup. They've defined who a startup is. They've given us a sense of the incentives. The bill is not yet out, but even if you go to the startupbill.ng, there are lots of information that you can find there to also guide you. So my take is to say, well done. Thank you to the guys that have done this. It's always going to get better. We have this in there. Now we do the amendments, right? But it's at least it's in there and it's better than what we had yesterday. So let me just have Oswald and Davidson just come up and just maybe give us a vote of thanks, and then we'll shut it down formally. Thank you so much. Davis, let's start with you.
All right, thanks, Kalu, and thanks to the good people that stay till the very end of this. Like we've tried saying throughout, criticize and critique these things because we've seen them happen from time to time. But this bill had the best intentions, and seeks to aid and help the. So let's rally around it. Let's understand it, and let's support it so it works for us. Thank you.
Super. Yeah. Also, go ahead, sir.
No, thank you very much, Carlo, for having this session. And I welcome, anybody on here wants to plan. We welcome the opportunity. The NSA team, they're ready to have more conversations that drives awareness. Like I keep saying, this is about collaboration and engagement. So therefore, the birthing process is big on ensuring that we're collaborating and engaging. We're about to go into two phases. Two parts of the second phase. First part being the implementation. We welcome all to participate in that implementation process. So ultimately, once the bill is out, you read it, there's a specific part that you're excited about. We'd love to hear your ideas. And the other part is state adoption. So I want everybody to leave here today going, why is my state not adopting NSB? And you need to start that conversation within your states, within your fellow citizens that are also in the ecosystem. Why is Akwa Ibom? Why is Enugu? Why is Kanu? Why is a number of other states are not? Yobe, Zamfara, I didn't mention earlier, have both announced that they're going to adopt the Nigerian Startup Bill. So why is your state not adopting the Nigerian Startup Bill? Thank you.
And also, that's the last question. If a state adopts this bill, what happens? What's the added advantage? The federal bill is out there. I can go to CAC. When the state adopts it, say in Abia State, what then happens?
So like I said, we're out to solve problems, right? So if you look at if you guys really take or took notes of what we said today, collaboration, engagement, disruption, displacement, and a number of the things we said today, and go apply it to every single problem that's ever happened. Crypto and FX. Just grab those, think about that. That's disruption and displacement. Lagos State, cab hailing, that's lack of collaboration and engagement. You keep looking at these problems, right? And some of these problems happen at where? The state level, subnational. Right? They don't happen in federal government. They open subnational issues in Lagos, issues there, So the idea is that every state will adopt the bill in their own way, with their own strategy, but the spirit of the bill that's come from national is what will exist. And that would increase the fabric of innovation across the country. So what will happen is that although you are from Akwa Ibom, but it could very well be that Zamfara is offering you free laptops and a place to stay. But your own Akwa Ibom is not, or Lagos, they are overwhelmed already. Why Lagos? You are now going to Kwara. Kwara is offering you a apartment for you and your entire team and an office space. Who knows? People are building tech cities all over the place. Those states are offering you decagon training for 5 of your people. States should compete. That's what it should be. States should say, "Ha, you smart guy, you're about to do a business. I should compete for you. I want you to come to my state." It happens for other industries. If you want to study that, just go and look at what Ogun State and Lagos do on that whole Abeokuta, Ekpe axis, and see the companies that sit right at the border, but they service Lagos, right? But they're in Ogun State. It's already happening in other sectors. So we're now saying for tech-enabled, states should fight for your business. And adopting the bill, states that don't adopt the bill should suffer for it, right? Because it means you're not prepared for me, right? If you prepare a place for me to eat, I will come eat and provide value in your state. I will hire people, right? And then you just asked that question, and I mentioned earlier, the tax incentive for employees can only happen at the state level. And there's several other things, being that we're in a federation, that can only happen at the state level. There's additional value to the tech-enabled ecosystem.
Excellent, excellent. Just want to make that point out there so folks can why you're talking. All right, guys, thank you so much. You've got your Saturday ahead of you. Next week, we're back here. We're going to review a manifesto or so. So I'll see you guys here, same time next week, 7 p.m. Thank you again, Davidson. Thank you again, Oswald. Thank you for all the folks that have dialed and sent the tweets and the texts and all that. I do appreciate you guys. You guys have a great day. I'll see you next time, and bye.